On May 23, 2026, Secretary of State Marco Rubio left a NATO foreign ministers meeting in Helsingborg and publicly delivered a message Washington had avoided stating directly for weeks. Rubio said, "The United States now needs a Plan B if Iran refuses to reopen the Strait of Hormuz within the next few weeks." He warned that Tehran could continue threatening commercial vessels or forcing ships to comply with the PGSA toll system. Rubio also introduced a new multinational framework focused on intelligence sharing, economic pressure, and coalition coordination. This was the first major public acknowledgement from Washington that diplomacy may fail. If Iran keeps the strait closed and continues using Hormuz as a pressure tool, military action could eventually follow. Rubio stressed that Plan B was not a declaration of war, but his comments confirmed that military options remain active if negotiations collapse. The proposal discussed in Sweden aimed to build coalition structures before escalation begins. Washington wants allied governments aligned politically and militarily before any direct confrontation occurs. At the same time, Iran was already facing severe internal pressure. President Donald Trump claimed Iran privately described itself as being in a state of collapse and urgently wanted the strait reopened. Brent crude prices climbed above $112 per barrel, while Iran's currency continued collapsing on black markets. The IRGC internet blackout had entered its 84th consecutive day. Reports suggested more than 1 million jobs had disappeared, and online commerce revenues had fallen by 50%. Iranian state media also admitted government policies themselves were worsening the crisis. The NCRI described deep factional disputes, inflation, labor unrest, water shortages, and growing instability inside the regime. The overall picture was not one of strength, but of a government struggling to contain multiple crises simultaneously. Rubio then publicly declared the Hormuz toll framework illegal and dangerous to global trade. He said no government could accept a system charging vessels millions of dollars to pass through one of the world's most important energy routes. His comments outlined the conditions under which the United States could justify military action. If Iran keeps the strait closed, threatens vessels, and maintains the toll system, Washington may eventually intervene directly. Military infrastructure for such a response is already deployed in the region. Project Freedom reportedly includes 15,000 personnel, over 100 aircraft, Arleigh Burke destroyers, Apache helicopters, and Seahawk helicopters. Rubio's maritime freedom construct is designed to provide the legal and political framework around that force posture. The strategy focuses on coalition participation, intelligence coordination, and economic pressure before escalation begins. Trump's state of collapse statement became even more significant in that context. According to reports, Tehran urgently wanted the strait reopened while simultaneously dealing with economic collapse and growing internal instability. Iran was also described as having a supreme leader blocking uranium transfers, and IRGC leadership operating from underground bunkers. At the same time, the regime continued rebuilding missile networks aimed toward the Strait of Hormuz. Rubio warned NATO allies that the timeline was now measured in weeks, not months. If diplomacy fails within that window, Plan B could shift from diplomacy to forced intervention. The framework introduced at the NATO summit focused on intelligence sharing, diplomatic coordination, and synchronized economic pressure. Its purpose was to create international legitimacy for any future operation connected to Hormuz. Iran responded by intensifying support for the PGSA toll system. The regime launched official propaganda campaigns, released maps extending influence into UAE waters, and continued demanding payments from vessels. An IRGC official warned that the Persian Gulf could become the largest blue graveyard for American Marines. However, the same organization had already lost 6 fast attack boats during the first day of Project Freedom operations. Attention then shifted toward Iran's internal economic crisis. The country had experienced 84 uninterrupted days of nationwide internet shutdowns. Digital businesses reportedly lost tens of millions of dollars each day because of the blackout. Estimates suggested overall economic losses had reached hundreds of trillions of tomans. More than 150,000 unemployment registrations appeared during a single reporting period. Employment opportunities collapsed while e-commerce revenues dropped by 50%. Factories, energy infrastructure, bridges, and rail systems were heavily damaged during the conflict. Meanwhile, Iran's currency fell to nearly 180,000 rials per dollar on black markets. Inflation surged to levels that made basic food increasingly unaffordable. Reports also claimed Iran's oil exports were losing roughly $500 million per day because of blockade pressure. The IRGC itself controls a large portion of Iran's oil export network. That meant the blockade directly threatened the organization's ability to fund operations and maintain internal loyalty. The NCRI report also described deep divisions inside the ruling elite and harsh suppression of labor protests. Even Iranian state media admitted internal government decisions were worsening the economic collapse. Trump's state of collapse statement connected directly with Rubio's Plan B. Iran reportedly informed Washington through indirect channels that it urgently wanted the strait reopened. But the IRGC cannot publicly appear to surrender under pressure. If Tehran reopens the strait because of economic collapse, its deterrence credibility would suffer permanent damage. That created the central diplomatic challenge. Iran needs a formula allowing the strait to reopen while still presenting the outcome domestically as a strategic decision rather than a defeat. Rubio's public timeline complicated those negotiations dramatically. By stating that someone may have to act within weeks, Washington shortened Tehran's window for diplomacy. The implied message was clear. A negotiated reopening is still possible now, but after that window closes, forced intervention becomes increasingly likely. Operationally, the structure for escalation already exists. Project Freedom's force package remains fully deployed and capable of rapid offensive operations. The deployment includes destroyers, such as the USS Rafael Peralta, USS Frankie Peterson Jr., and USS Truxtun. Apache and Seahawk helicopters already demonstrated their ability to destroy Iranian fast attack boats within minutes. Under Plan B, operations would likely shift from defensive escort missions toward direct strikes against Iranian military infrastructure. CENTCOM previously confirmed B-1 bombers targeted underground missile bunkers during earlier operations. Intelligence assessments later reported that most of those missile facilities had already been rebuilt. Those restored missile sites would likely become the opening targets if diplomacy collapses. The B-1 platform is also receiving long-range anti-ship missile capability and potential hypersonic weapon integration. Those systems are specifically designed for hardened or time-sensitive targets near the strait. Strategically, Rubio's Plan B serves multiple purposes simultaneously. It functions as an ultimatum, an alliance-building effort, and a signal toward factions inside Iran seeking a negotiated exit. Rubio identified the specific actions that would trigger escalation. Keeping the strait closed, threatening vessels, and operating the toll system were all publicly defined as red lines. His statement also strengthened factions inside Iran arguing for diplomacy before conditions worsened further. Those officials can now point to a visible timeline and credible military threat. The core issue for Tehran is leverage. If Plan B destroys the missile sites, naval assets, and command systems enforcing the PGSA toll structure, Iran loses its final major operational pressure tool. That is why pressure inside the regime has intensified. The next phase depends on whether mediation channels can produce a diplomatic formula before Plan B activates. It also depends on whether Tehran truly believes Washington is prepared to act militarily. For now, Rubio's remarks suggest the United States is preparing seriously for both diplomacy and escalation at the same time. Share your assessment and explain whether you believe Plan B will ultimately be executed, or whether Iran's state of collapse message signals the beginning of a negotiated exit. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.